Welcome back to the deep dive.
It's good to be here.
So today we're doing something a little different.
Yeah, definitely a change of pace for us.
It is. We're usually looking at, modern tech or psychology, but today we're putting on our detective hats.
I like that. Or maybe our archaeologist hats.
Ooh, even better. And I mean that pretty literally. We have a stack of research here that treats history less like a textbook and more like a crime scene.
Right, or an archaeological dig. We're sifting through the dirt looking for shards of evidence.
Exactly. And the specific subject we're investigating today is, well, it's a heavy one. We're looking at the historical documentation behind two of the biggest religious claims in history.
The resurrection of Jesus Christ and the origin of the Book of Mormon.
A huge topic.
It is. And I think it's important to state our mission right up front. We aren't here to tell you what to believe. Faith is, a very personal journey.
Of course.
But the source material we're working with today makes a very specific point. It says, absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence.
Sure. That's the classic logical rule.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you can't find the smoking gun doesn't mean a crime didn't happen.
Exactly. History is just full of gaps. But, and this is really the pivot point for our whole deep dive, when evidence does exist, when you actually have the papers, the manuscripts,
then you can examine.
And then you can have a rational examination. It moves the conversation from, I feel this is true, to, okay, what does the record actually say?
And the stakes are pretty high, right?
Yeah.
The source points out that if these documents actually hold up, the implications aren't just, trivia.
Not at all.
It kind of upends your life, just like it did for those apostles back in the day.
It definitely forces you to pay attention.
Okay.
This is basically an exercise in textual criticism. We're evaluating reliability, we're checking the timeline, looking for fingerprints.
So let's get into this.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get to the miracles themselves, I think we have to talk about how we handle history in general.
That's the foundation for all of this.
Because I think most of us assume that for someone super famous, like in the ancient world, we must have this massive archive on them.
It's the most common misconception. The source calls the historical record ragged.
Ragged.
Yeah, and the analogy it uses is great. Think of history as a borderless, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle.
Okay.
But someone threw away half the box.
Oh.
And some of the pieces you do have might be from a completely different puzzle.
Okay, let's make this concrete. The source brings up Alexander the Great. Now, he's undeniable, a huge figure.
The biggest celebrity of antiquity. He conquered the known world.
So we must have letters he wrote, or, I don't know, a biography written by one of his generals.
Yes, you would absolutely think so. But if you walk into a library and ask for the earliest written biography of Alexander the Great that we possess.
How long am I waiting?
About 300 years?
Wait, what? 300 years after he died?
Correct. The earliest sources we have for him are from the Roman era, centuries after he lived.
That seems impossible. That's like us trying to write about George Washington today with 0 letters, 0 newspapers, nothing from anyone who actually met him.
That's a perfect analogy. You're relying entirely on oral tradition. And here's the kicker. That is the standard for ancient history.
That's the baseline.
That is the baseline. Take Tiberius Caesar. He was the Roman emperor when Jesus was alive. The best text we have for his life, penned 80 years after he died.
80 years. Even for the emperor of Rome.
Yes. And even when we do find texts, we almost never, ever have the originals. We have copies of copies.
And those copies can be from way later.
1,000 years later sometimes, like with Aristotle. The source mentions Livy, the great Roman historian. He wrote 142 books on Rome's history. We've only found 35 of them.
Wow. The rest are just gone.
Gone. History is basically a Swiss cheese of information.
So understanding that backdrop is key.
It's everything. Because against that backdrop of a ragged record, the amount of documentation for the New Testament and the Book of Mormon is, statistically speaking, just staggering.
Okay, so let's aim at that first target then, the New Testament. The source uses this analogy of a bullseye.
Right. Think of Jesus' life as a target. The bullseye is the main event, the resurrection.
Okay.
Normally, as a historian, you're standing so far back because of that time gap we talked about, you can't even see the bullseye.
But the argument here is that with the New Testament manuscripts, we're not in the parking lot. We're right up against the target.
We are. And it starts with just the sheer quantity of what we have. It's a total data dump.
It's not just a few scrolls.
Oh, no. We're talking about approximately 5,800 Greek manuscripts. Then you add 10,000 Latin ones and another 9,300 in other languages.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Yeah.
Does the number of copies really matter? I can print 1 million copies of a novel today. doesn't make it true.
That's a fair question, but you have to remember these were all hand-copied. It was incredibly laborious. People didn't copy things thousands of times unless they were considered extremely important. But more than that, it allows for cross-referencing. With 20,000 copies from all over, you can compare them and weed out scribal errors. If you only have one copy, you're stuck with its typos.
So the volume allows for better quality control. Okay. What about the timeline then? Alexander's 300-year gap? How does the Bible compare to that?
This is where that gap just shrinks dramatically. The Gospel of Mark is generally dated to about 25 to 30 years after the resurrection.
25 years?
And Mark likely used an even earlier source. Scholars call it the Passion narrative. That dates to just 7 years after the event.
7 years? I mean, that's nothing. I can remember exactly what I was doing 7 years ago.
Exactly. And even the Gospel of John, which is usually seen as the latest one, is dated to about 60 to 65 years after. Still closer than our best source for Emperor Tiberius.
That's incredible. The source also mentioned something about a garbage dump.
Ah, yes. Oxyrhynchus in Egypt. Archaeologists literally found the ancient town dump.
They're digging through ancient trash.
Literally. And because the climate is so dry, all this papyrus ancient paper was preserved. They found tax records, personal letters,
And
scripture. They found fragments like P90 and P104, which contain parts of John and Matthew, and they date to the 2nd century.
So what, maybe 100 years after the events?
Even less, sometimes just a few decades removed from the original. To find a text like that, just casually discarded in the trash, tells you it was in a wide circulation very, very early on.
Wow. But the source digs even deeper than the Gospels. It talks about a specific creed in Paul's letters. This seemed to be the real smoking gun for historians.
This is arguably the most critical piece of textual evidence. It's in 1 Corinthians 15. Paul writes, "For I delivered unto you, first of all, that which I also received."
That which I received? That sounds formal, like he's reciting something official.
He is. It's a creed, an oral tradition that was passed down to him. And he lists the core beliefs. Christ died, was buried, rose again, and then he lists the witnesses.
Right. Peter, the 12 apostles, and then a group of 500 brethren at once.
And the dating on this creed is what's just, well, it's crazy.
Why? How early is it?
Scholars have analyzed the language. It has phrasing that predates Paul's own Greek writing style. And critical scholars, not just believers, people like Gerd Ludman, they date the formulation of this creed to within 2 to 4 years of the crucifixion.
2 to 4 years. Okay, help me understand why that's such a big deal. Why is 2 years better than 20?
Think about how legends form. They need time to grow. They need the eyewitnesses to die off so no one can stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, that's not what happened.
Right. Dead men don't fact-check your story.
Exactly. But 2 years, that's yesterday in historical time. It means this core belief died, buried, seen alive, was formalized and circulating while all the people involved were still right there in Jerusalem. There's just no runway for a myth to take off.
The bullseye is right in your face.
It is. And it's not just the Bible saying this. We have non-Christian sources like Tacitus and Josephus who confirm the basic outline.
Right. They confirm Jesus lived, was executed by Pilate, and his followers worshipped him.
And these were Roman and Jewish historians who considered Christians a nuisance. They had no reason to do them any favors.
Okay, so a really dense cluster of evidence for the New Testament. Now, let's make that massive pivot from ancient Jerusalem to 19th century America.
Right, and here the whole perspective shifts. If the Bible sources get us close to the target, the source argues the Book of Mormon sources put us directly in the room.
This feels different. We're not dealing with copies of copies anymore.
No. We have the actual physical artifacts. We have what's called the original manuscript.
The actual paper that the scribes wrote on as Joseph Smith was dictating.
The very same. Now, only about 28% of it survived. It was stored in a damp cornerstone for decades and got badly damaged.
But we have it.
We have it. And we have the printer's manuscript, which was the clean copy they made for the printing press. That one is nearly complete.
And just to underscore how valuable these are, the printer's manuscript sold for, what was the number?
$35 million.
$35 million.
Yeah.
For a stack of paper.
In 2017, it was the second highest price ever paid for a manuscript, right behind a Bill Gates purchase of Da Vinci's writings.
So these are viewed as serious, verified historical documents.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have the paper. But the deep dive also gets really specific about the translation tools, the interpreters.
Yes, often called the Urim and Thummim. And what's amazing is how consistent the witness descriptions are from people like Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmer.
What do they describe? What did it look like?
Not a crystal ball. It was much more like a device. They described two clear stones set in silver rims, like spectacles,
Giant silver glasses with crystal lenses.
essentially. And the method described was that Joseph Smith would look into these stones, see the translated words, and dictate them. He wasn't looking at notes, he was reading from the interpreters.
This brings us to the tight translation theory. This was the part of the research that really made me sit up and pay attention.
It's fascinating stuff. The theory is that Joseph didn't just get a general idea, like this chapter is about a war.
He got the exact wording.
The exact wording, letter by letter. And the evidence comes from the scribes. Emma Smith, his wife, said he'd dictate for hours, take a break for a meal, and then come back and pick up right where he left off without ever asking, where were we?
Which is almost impossible to do if you're just making up a complex story. I'd need a recap every 5 minutes.
For sure. But she also noted something about spelling. Sometimes he could even pronounce the names he was seeing.
Like the name Sarah.
Yes, a simple name. But apparently he stumbled over it and had to spell it out for her. If he's making it up, he just says Sarah. If he's reading an unfamiliar text, he might stumble.
Okay, but this is where it gets really interesting. The errors. You'd think errors in a holy book are a problem. But here, the errors actually prove the method.
This is the real detective work, scribal blunders. Because we have the original manuscript, we can see the cross-outs and fixes, and they tell a story.
Let's use a meat versus beat example from the source.
Okay, this is from Alma 57. The line is supposed to be that they did beat the Lamanites in battle, but the scribe, listening to Joseph, first wrote meat.
Meat and beat. They sound almost identical.
Exactly. It's a phonetic error, a hearing error. If you're copying a text visually, you don't mistake the written word beat for meat. They look different.
But if someone is speaking them aloud...
It's an easy mistake. The scribe writes meat, realizes it's wrong, crosses it out, and writes beat. That little mistake is a fingerprint of an oral dictation.
It proves he was speaking, not that the scribe was copying from another paper.
Precisely. It lines up perfectly with the witness testimony.
There was another one that was even stranger. The name. Coriantumr.
Yes, coriantumr. Look at how it ends. M-R.
Right. No vowel. M-R.
Now, you're Oliver Cowdery, an English speaker in the 1820s. You hear the sound coriantumr. How do you spell the end?
T-U-M-M-E-R. Or maybe M-E-R. Something that makes sense in English.
And that's exactly what he did. In the manuscript, you can see he starts to write it the English phonetic way, and then he stops, crosses it out.
Why?
That's the key. Why change a normal spelling to one that makes no sense in English? The only logical reason is that someone spelled it out for him. C-O-R-I-A-N-T-U-M-R.
So Joseph must have said, no, stop, it's T-U-M-R.
Which implies Joseph was reading a fixed visual text. He was constrained by a spelling the scribe couldn't see or guess.
It really hammers home that tight translation idea. He wasn't just freestyling.
And it also says something about the editing process, or really the lack of one. These errors are corrected on the fly. There's no second draft where he goes back to fix plot holes. The manuscript is raw.
And that rawness matches the claims of a rapid, miraculous translation.
The manuscript matches the miracle. That's how the source puts it.
Okay, so let's synthesize this. We have two huge claims, the resurrection and the restoration, and two very different kinds of paper trails.
For the Bible, you have the sheer weight of thousands of copies and the incredible proximity of the sources to the event, far better than for other major figures of antiquity.
You're standing close to the target.
Very close. Then, for the Book of Mormon, you have the actual original documents, eyewitness accounts of the translation tool, and these scribal errors that act like a fingerprint of the exact method of dictation.
You're in the room where it happened.
You're in the room. The physical evidence we have aligns with the supernatural claims of how it was produced.
But I have to ask the big so what question. Does any of this prove the miracles happened? Does finding a cross out of the word meat prove an angel visited Joseph Smith?
And the source is very clear on this. No. Historical methods cannot prove a miracle. You can't put God in a test tube.
Right.
History is about probability, not certainty. But what this research argues is that the sources survive scrutiny. They don't fall apart. We aren't dealing with legends from 500 years later. We are dealing with early, robust, documentable evidence.
So for you, the listener, it moves the conversation from just blind faith to informed investigation.
Exactly. It validates the intellectual pursuit. You can use your brain and your heart together. The evidence invites you to take the claims seriously, not just dismiss them as fairy tales.
I love that. Now, before we sign off, there was one final thought from the source that I found really provocative.
Let's hear it.
We usually think of errors, typos or mistakes, as a weakness in a holy text. We want it to be perfect.
Of course.
But in the case of the Book of Mormon, these human blunders hearing meet instead of beat might actually be the strongest proof of its unique origin story.
Hmm.
And it makes you wonder, what other mistakes in history might actually be the keys that unlock the truth?
That's a great question to end on. Sometimes the flaw is the feature.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a fascinating look at the papers behind the belief.
Always a pleasure. Keep digging.
We'll see you next time.